see you watching my last video. Yeah, it was my second time watching it. I really like it. Well thought out. Thanks, man. That means a lot. But I do have one question for you. What's up? In the cooking scenario, how did you get the overhead shot with the OP3? I mean, you were using both hands, so there's no way you could have been holding the OP3. Well, a magician never tells his secrets. Come on, man. All right. I'll do you one better. I'll go ahead and break down all of the shots that I got on the OP3 in this video just once. For real? Cause you know, I'm new to this YouTube stuff, so any little bit helps. I mean, that's the least I could do for you, liking, commenting, and subscribing to the channel. All right then, let me take some notes. That's a good idea. And while we're at it, I'll go over the different angles, settings, and gear that I use other than the creator combo. All right, I'm ready. Let's get started. First up is the cooking sequence. I started off with a shot of me filling up the kettle with water. This shot was pretty straightforward. I just sat the OP3 in the far corner where it can capture me, the kettle, and the water hose in the shot. Then I followed that up with a close-up shot of me pressing the buttons on the kettle to start boiling the water. For this one, I moved the OP3 closer to the kettle and focused on the buttons. Both shots were filmed in 4K at 30 frames per second. Okay. I see the attention to detail. But what about this next one is one of the more interesting shots of the sequence, the overhead over the stove shot. Now this is the one I've been waiting for. I had a feeling this would grab your attention. To get this shot, I screwed the OP3 onto the suction mount and then mounted it to the microwave above the stove. This worked for the majority of my shots, but I did experiment with other surfaces, like the cabinets, when filming the bell pepper scene. Although it did work for a while, it inevitably came crashing down as I experienced my first and hopefully only drop of the Osmo Pocket 3. Did it break? Nah, I got lucky, but I was spooked though. So I pulled out the C-stand and mounted the OP3 to that for the rest of the overhead shots. And the rest of the bell pepper shots was shot from a low side view and a high front view. For both shots, the OP3 was mounted on the suction cup mount. For the lower side view, the OP3 was positioned horizontally and close to the counter. And for the high shot, it was positioned vertically up against the wall. But I have to say, I didn't have any problems mounting the OP3 on the microwave. It was the cabinet that got me. So as long as you stick to a clean, smooth surface, you should be fine. And all of these shots were shot in 4K at 30 frames per second. Microwave good, cabinets bad. Clean and smooth surfaces only. Got it. The next interesting one was the look-up angle of me sprinkling the green beans into a pot, aka my salt bay shot. So to get this shot, I sat the OP3 in a large empty pot, made sure that the camera was tilted up and looking at me, and then I started sprinkling the beans in front of the OP3. Okay, now that's clever. Then I followed that up with a side view of me actually sprinkling the green beans into the pot of food. Both shots were shot in 4K at 120 frames per second. And we wrap up the kitchen scenario with a side view of me plating the food in the containers. This was a simple shot. I used the extended battery handle and positioned the OP3 closer to the edge of the counter to make sure all the containers were in the shot. And this was shot in 4K at 30 frames per second. But what about the gear? You haven't mentioned that yet. So the gear that you've seen throughout this sequence were the triple suction mount from Telesin and the Amaran MC light from Aperture. The Telesin mount has 3 suction cups as the name suggests. You really get a strong grip when using all 3 mounts, but if you're in a situation where you only need one grip like I did, you can unscrew one of the legs and just use that leg as a mount. And it holds up pretty well. Seriously, I mounted my A7S III with a 24-70 lens to the sunroof of my car with just a single mount and had no problem. I used the MC light from Aperture to light some of the scenes when I needed the extra light. I like it because you can adjust the brightness, change the color temperature, and change the color in general. You can also control it with the Sidus Link app on your phone. And as I mentioned earlier, I did use this C-stand to hold the OP3 for the rest of my overhead shots. The next sequence is the outdoor workout. And the only gear that I used for this one was a simple tripod that I picked up from Amazon. Alright, so the first shot here is of me tying my cleats to get ready for the workout. I actually set the OP3 on the ground for this shot using the tripod that came with the Creatives combo. This was shot in 4K at 120 frames per second. The next set of shots were static shots on and off the Amazon tripod. They were really simple, boring shots of me setting up the drills. So to make them more interesting, I filmed them at multiple angles and at different ranges. And they were all shot in 4K at 30 frames per second. What do you mean by static shot? I mean shots with little to no movement in them. Pro tip, when you want to make a static shot more interesting and you don't have a slider or someone to help you, just shoot the scene at different angles. I've literally done this in almost all my videos since I started my channel, and it helped a lot. Try it out. I'm sure you won't regret it. Shoot from different angles and ranges. Got it. Then we grabbed some shots of me running. I started off with a wide angle shot with the OP3 on the Amazon tripod. Then the next couple of shots I filmed handheld. I wanted to get a POV shot of me running across the field and coming back. The next group of shots are of the drills. So for this particular segment, I wanted to showcase the active track feature a bit more. So I set up the OP3 on the Amazon tripod and had it sitting about 8 to 10 feet away from the cones. Then I enabled active track and started running the drills. All of these shots were filmed in 4K at 30 frames per second, except for a couple epic slow motion shots that were taken with the OP3 sitting on the ground. One of me jumping towards the OP3, and the other is of me breaking and cutting off the cone. Those were really fun to film at 4K at 120 frames per second. Yeah, those are some pretty dope shots, especially when you cut off the cones. Made me feel like I was out there doing the drills myself. You know, in my former life, where I was an all-star athlete. Right. Next up is the car sequence. This was my favorite one to film. Maybe it's because it was more cinematic than the others. This sequence was shot almost entirely in 4K at 120 frames per second for that nice cinematic feel. Starting with the opening shot. For this shot, I bent down behind the car and held the camera behind the tire and slowly pulled it towards me to reveal the car. I thought this would be a cool way to start this scene with a revealing shot. That was a nice touch. For the next shot, I sat the OP3 near the front of the car and opened the door and got in. Then I filmed the same scene from a different angle. Remember what I said earlier about the angles? In this case, I sat the OP3 on the ground next to the driver's side door, looking up. Then I opened the door and got in the car. Then I mounted it to the passenger side window to get the same shot again. It's all about the angles. Yeah, that was corny. I should probably edit that out. You should definitely edit that out. Also, how long has the camera been there? So this next shot is of me starting the car. For this one, I held the OP3 handheld while I pressed the button to start the car. Then I got another handheld shot of me pressing the button to open the sunroof, followed by a lookup shot of the sunroof opening. To get that shot, I sat the OP3 on the center console and pointed it straight up at the sunroof. Man, you really like to get into all the details. Of course, that's what makes a good story great. Like this next shot I got. I had to get this classic shot of me through the rearview mirror. I feel like you can't have a car sequence without this shot. The way I got this shot was by mounting the OP3 to the sunroof and pointing it at the rear view mirror at an angle that showed me. The next shot is of me grabbing the steering wheel. For this shot, I mounted the OP3 to the windshield and angled the camera just behind the steering wheel, just to make the shot a bit more interesting. Then I wanted to get a shot of the gear shift. This was an interesting one to get. I wanted to get a low angle shot, so that eliminated sitting the OP3 on the console. But sitting it in the cup holder didn't work out that well either. What I ended up doing was wedging the tripod of the OP3 between my car seat and the center console. I managed to get the shot that way. This was shot in 4K at 30 frames per second. Alright, now we're stepping out the car for the drive-away shot. I sat the OP3 about 2 to 3 feet away from the rear tire and made sure that the tire was in the center of the frame. Then I got back in the car and drove off. This was shot in 4K at 30 frames per second. And we wrap up this sequence with a nice transition of a traffic time lapse. For this one, I picked a random intersection and I set up the OP3 on the Amazon tripod on the sidewalk and filmed the traffic in time lapse mode. This was shot in 4K at 30 frames per second on a 1-second interval for 10 minutes. And that's just about all the shots that were filmed on the OP3. Does that help? Oh yeah, this definitely gives me an idea of how to get started. Thanks, bro. This means a lot. No worries, I got you. I'll link the gear in the description below in case you want to check them out. Why does this sound like one of your videos? Oh, and subscribe for more content if you haven't already, and hit that like button on your way out. Wait, so you've been recording the whole time? And if you're new here, welcome to the Tech Tribe, where the vibes are good and the content is better.
I can't believe you did this again. Son of a...
And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Deuces.